where things come from or what did what or what made what. So it's not that in all probability this is from God. It's not that they don't say that. It's just they say, we can't do that, so we have to work some way out whereby we can explain all of this without bringing Allah in to the understanding. That is a methodology. And you cannot bring God into a scientific paper. They will not accept it. They will say that is unscientific. Now, one of their astronomers, Jastrow, said the problem is that everything seems to indicate that there was an intelligent power behind this whole thing. And it certainly makes a lot easier for us to just say God did this than to try to work this whole thing out without bringing God into our understanding. So there are scientists within that methodology that do have, they're beginning to seriously question the premise of the rationalist 18th and 19th century pseudoscientists who have attempted to understand things without any recourse to the divinities, to theology. So this idea of allama is that the human being, there's an imprinting that goes on. And in this way, the soul, in a sense, is like wax. It's like wax. And what's being taught is like an imprinting that goes into the soul. Or you could look at it like clay. So a teacher, in a sense, is somebody that's working with clay. Or you could look at it that it's carving away coal. There are many metaphors that you could use to describe the same thing. But ultimately what's happening is an imprint on the soul. There is an imprint taking place. And this is what ta'aleem is. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala began the revelation by telling us, allama al-insan. Right? That He taught man, allama bil-qalam. He taught with the pen. And the first, if you look, see, it's when we speak about the lawh and the qalam, these were two creations of Allah in the beginning. Allah created a lawh and a qalam. Now you have to understand, lawh, the original alwah that human beings had were made out of what? What were the first writings that we found? Clay. The first writings were clay. And the pen made an imprint on the clay. Now what are we made out of? We're made out of clay. The first tablets were clay tablets. And the pen was the active force, the tablet was the passive force, and these are two opposites that Allah created. And this is how He taught the human being, through active and passive forces. The teacher is an active force, the student is a passive force, but then there's this subtle activity from the student and passivity from the teacher, because these things are not, they can't be reduced to simple opposites. There's a lot going on in the teaching and learning process. So ta'aleem is the second term. And this is basically how the Arabs understood the idea of ta'aleem, that it came out of this idea of alama, of making a sign. And Allah has alamat. He talks about the signs. And the human being is a sign reader. إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَةٍ لِلْعَالِمِينَ. The human being is an alim. And in a riwayah, alamin. Warsa's alamin. So it's active, passive. It's going on at the same time. Allah is in reality the alim. One of the things that Sidi ibn Ataidah says is that Allah has prohibited us from claiming anything that's anybody else in the Sharia. It's haram for you to claim the wealth of others. So he said, what about claiming what is Allah's? Like al-ghina, to say, ana ghani, I'm rich, or ana alim, I'm a scholar, I'm a knower. These are attributes for Allah, and that's why the Prophet ﷺ said, لا يزال أحدكم يتعلم حتى أن يقول قد علمت فقد جهل. One of you will continue to learn until he says, now I know. In other words, I'm alim, and then he's ignorant at that point. Because these are attributes of Allah, and when we use it to describe somebody, we say the alim, it's majaz. It's a metaphor. It's not really, he is not really an alim. وَفَوْقَ كُلِّ ذِي عِلْمٍ عَلِيمٍ وَمَا أُوتِيتُ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. You've only been given a little bit of knowledge. So the real knower is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, that is education, and I'm going to go into that after. But I want to now move to the heart. In the English language, we say heart, and it comes from a Sanskrit term, which means the thing that leaps. Obviously, the ancients there, because we have Indo-European in English, it's an Indo-European language. It's coming out of Sanskrit. There are, I'm going to try to define all my Arabic terms because there are a lot of people that might not know some of the Arabic terms, but I'm getting out of the Arabic part in a few minutes. I'm going to deal with qalb, and that's a bit, and then I'm going to move out of there. So for people that are having a little difficult time, bear with me here. The word in Sanskrit, because we're an Indo-European language, English is coming out of the Indo-European family of languages. The word heart has the idea of something in the breast that leaps. And people say when I saw him, my heart skipped a beat. They can say that because they were so afraid of him or because they were in love with him. There's different ways that can be said. But the point being is that the heart is an interesting thing because at a certain point you do become aware of your heart. You're not always aware of it. Like right now I can feel my heart in my chest. I can feel it, and it's got that qabd bast, that moving in and out, contraction, expansion. Now another word for heart in Latin was cor, and we get the English word courage because the place of shaja'a, of courage, is the heart, the core of the human being. That's where courage comes from, the center of the human being. Now, in Arabic, there are many words for heart. The Quran uses the word qalb. And qalb, in the Arabic language, comes from a root word that means to turn over. Qalaba, qalabtuhu. I turned it over. Qalabtuhu. Yanqalibu means to retreat. Inqilab in modern Arabic and Persian, inqilab means a revolution. Like in Iran they call it the inqilab, the revolution, the Iranian revolution. It means a turning over, which is revolution in English means for something to turn over. So this is what the qalb is, something that turns over. Now the dua that the Prophet ﷺ did more than any other dua from all of his duas was Ya muqallib al-qulub thabbit qalbi ala dinika. O turner over of the hearts, make my heart firm on your deen, on this path of ours. Because the nature of the heart is that it turns over, it flips over. One moment you're inclining towards obedience, and then the next moment you find yourself inclining towards disobedience. Or one moment a person's inclining towards disobedience, and somebody reminds him of Allah, and suddenly he's inclining towards obedience. This is the inqilab. This is the movement of the heart. And what the Prophet ﷺ was asking for was a heart that was firm. That it didn't, la yataqallabu, it doesn't move back and forth between obedience and disobedience. So the other words in the Quran, the same word that means core in Arabic is lub. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا يَذَّكَّرُوا إِلَّا أُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. Though the only ones who really remember this Quran are people of albab. Lub in Arabic is the pith. It's the seed. Like in a fruit you have a seed. That's called the lub. Because in that the whole tree is contained. The whole tree is contained in the seed. The oak is in the acorn, if you nurture it. So the nature of the heart, and this is the extraordinary thing about the heart, it is the lub of man. It's the seed of man. And what